You don't belong here, move! Tiffany's voice sliced through the lavish cabin a split second before her palm did a violent crack, exploding against Serafina's cheek. The private jet fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. Serafina didn't shout, didn't retreat. As the entitled socialite looked on approvingly and the crew hesitated, Tiffany doubled down drunk on the illusion of power. But while she gloated over the woman she believed was powerless, Serafina simply straightened her voice calm enough to chill the cabin. Because the person Tiffany had just slapped wasn't a random passenger, she was the owner of the aircraft, the company, and the fate of everyone on board. Titter Airport in New Jersey is not like other airports. It breathes money. There is no TSA scramble, no screaming children, no fast food courts. There is a quiet hush of leather jet fuel and billion-dollar handshakes. It is the preferred gateway for the masters of the universe leaving New York City, and the private terminal for Vance Aviation was the newest, most exclusive jewel in its crown. Serafina Vance walked through the smoked glass doors, a simple black Hermes duffel over her shoulder. She wore no makeup, and her hair was pulled back in a simple, elegant twist. Her charcoal grey cashmere sweatsuit and simple white sneakers were high quality but screamed comfort, not wealth. To the untrained eye, she could have been a personal assistant, a nanny, or perhaps a favoured niece of an actual client. This was, of course, exactly the point. Serafina was the founder, CEO, and sole owner of Vance Aviation. At 34, she had disrupted an industry dominated by old men and older money. She'd built her fleet from 3 refurbished jets to over 50 state-of-the-art Gulfstream and Bombardier aircraft in less than 5 years. Her company's reputation was built on 2 pillars: unparalleled luxury and absolute ironclad discretion. Today, she was flying her own New York to LA route unannounced as a passenger. It was a spot-checker secret shopper mission to ensure her famously rigorous standards were being met. The lounge attendant at the desk, a bright young man named Alex, saw her and immediately stood his eyes widening. Ms. V. Serafina raised a single subtle finger. He stopped instantly. "My name is Sarah. Just checking on the manifest for the 10 a.m. to LAX. Alex, a consummate professional, caught on immediately. "Of course, ma'am. You are one of 2 passengers today on flight VA27. Please make yourself comfortable. Ms. Reynolds is handling cabin service today." He gestured toward the lounge, a space of brushed oak soft Italian leather and a sprawling bar. "Thank you, Alex." Serafina gave him a small, appreciative nod. He understood. She took a seat in a quiet corner, pulling out a tablet. The only other passenger in the lounge was impossible to miss. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a helmet of stiff blonde hair and a face pulled taut by expensive surgeries. She was draped in a loud fur-trimmed cape and was speaking abrasively into her phone. "No, I told him, if the bid is under 50 million, don't even bother me." It's an insult. An absolute insult. This was Serafina recognized from the manifest. Mrs. Eleanor Davenport, wife of a shipping magnate, a major investor in one of her chief competitors. Interesting. A moment later, the cabin attendant for the flight entered the lounge. She was tall, blonde, and moved with a brittle, practiced confidence. Her name tag read, Tiffany. She immediately bypassed Serafina, making a beeline for the louder, wealthier-looking client. "Mrs. Davenport, I'm Tiffany, your lead flight attendant for today. It is an absolute honor to have you on board." Tiffany's voice was a syrupy coo. "Can I get you a pre-flight glass of Dom Perrin, or perhaps a mimosa?" Both Mrs. Davenport snapped, not looking up from her phone. "And make sure it's the 2008 vintage. I can't stand that new swill." "Of course, at once." Tiffany smiled, a wide plastic grin that didn't reach her eyes. As she turned to go to the bar, she finally clocked Serafina. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan. From the simple sneakers to the unadorned face, the smile vanished, replaced by a look of mild irritation. "Mom." Tiffany's voice was no longer syrupy. It was flat cold. "Good morning," Serafina said, looking up from her tablet. "This lounge is for Vance Aviation passengers only. Are you with the service? Deliveries are at the back hangar." Serafina felt the first prickle of anger, but she kept her voice perfectly level. This was the test. I'm a passenger on Flight 227. Tiffany's lip curled in a tiny, almost imperceptible sneer. She glanced at the manifest on Alex's desk, then back at Serafina. Vance Sarah. She read her voice, laced with disbelief. Right. Well, coffee is self-serve over there. She gestured vaguely toward a machine before turning her full attention back to retrieving Mrs. Davenport's champagne. Serafina watched her go. The microaggression was textbook. Tiffany had assessed Serafina's race and casual dress, and in a fraction of a second had categorized her as other, as less. She hadn't even offered her a drink, let alone the Dom Perrin. Mrs. Davenport, having finished her call now, also noticed Serafina. She nudged Tiffany as she was handed her champagne. "Tiffany, dear," she said, her voice a loud stage whisper. "What is that doing in here?" "I thought this was supposed to be exclusive." Tiffany leaned in conspiratorially. "I know, Mom. I checked. Apparently she's a passenger. Probably a competition winner or some diversity hire quotota. Don't you worry. I'll make sure she stays separate." Serafina heard every word. Her fingers tightened on her tablet. The test had just begun, and her employee was already failing spectacularly. She took a deep breath, centered herself, and stood up. It was time to board. The aircraft was a Gulfstream G700, the flagship of the Vance aviation fleet. Its custom interior had cost over $20 million, featuring hand-stitched Italian leather rare macaw wood paneling and a full bedroom suite. It was designed to be a skybound sanctuary. Tiffany and Mrs. Davenport had first Tiffany finning over the older woman carrying her bags and laughing at her unfunny jokes. Serafina followed a few paces behind carrying her own duffel. As she stepped onto the plane, Tiffany physically moved to block her path. "Just a moment. Mrs. Davenport is getting settled in the main cabin. You'll be seated in the aft section." Serafina looked past her. The G700 was configured with 3 zones. The main cabin, the conference center, and the aft owner's suite, a private stateroom room with a full bed and ensuite shower. Serafina's test booking was naturally for the owner's suite. "My apologies," Serafina said politely. "I believe my seat is in the aft stateroom room." Tiffany let out a short, sharp laugh. The stateroom room? Oh, honey, no. That suite is reserved for our diamond tier clients. People who own the plane, you know." She winked at Mrs. Davenport, who was watching with undisguised amusement. "Your seat is 4A in the back. There is no 4A on this manifest." Serafina said, her voice still quiet, but now edged with steel. "The manifest lists 2 passengers, Mrs. Davenport and myself. My ticket is for the stateroom room. Please step aside." Tiffany's face hardened. The plastic smile was gone, replaced by raw hostility. "Look, I don't know who you think you are or what contest you won to get on this jet. But I am the authority here. You will sit where I tell you to sit. Mrs. Davenport is our priority client. I will not have her disturbed by you wandering around." "Disturbed?" Serafina repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "Yes, disturbed," Mrs. Davenport chimed in, stepping forward. "People like you are always trying to get things you haven't earned. This is a private flight, not a public bus. Go to the back where you belong." Before Serafina could respond, the co-pilot Mark, a man she had personally interviewed and hired, emerged from the cockpit. He saw Serafina and his face lit up in a panic. "Miss Vance, good morning. We weren't expecting you." Serafina met his gaze. The jig was up, but the test wasn't over. Tiffany and Mrs. Davenport both froze. "Miss Vance." Tiffany whispered, her face going pale, but Mrs. Davenport recovered first. She laughed, a harsh grating sound. "Vance? Oh, I see. Are you related to the owner, is that it? Are you the scholarship case, the long-lost cousin?" Tiffany, seeing an ally, regained her footing. She looked from Mrs. Davenport to Serafina. She clearly didn't believe the co-pilot. She thought he had simply mistaken the name. "Sarah Vance, not Serafina Vance, right?" She sneered. "Nice try." Mark stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "Tiffany, This is Ms. Serafina Vance, the CEO of Mark. Serafina cut him off, her voice sharp. Thank you. I can handle this. Return to the cockpit. Mark hesitated, looking at the two hostile women. Ma'am, that's an order. Captain in training. Mark's eyes widened. He nodded, recognizing the tone of his ultimate boss. Yes, Mum. He shot one last warning glance at Tiffany and disappeared. The cabin was thick with tension. Tiffany, now genuinely confused and unnerved, was vibrating with anger. She had been challenged and now potentially embarrassed. You've had your little power trip. Tiffany spat, lowering her voice. I don't care what your last name is. On this plane, I give the orders. Now go to seat 4A. There is no 4A, Serafina said again. I'm going to my seat, the one I paid for, the one I own. She made to move past Tiffany. No, you are not. Tiffany shoved her, not hard, but a clear physical push. You are not allowed in the stateroom. Get your hands off me, Serafina warned, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. Or what Tiffany sneered. You'll report me. I am the report. I'm warning you, Tiffany. Stand down. You don't warn me. You don't warn anyone. Mrs. Davenport cried, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Put her in her place, Tiffany. It was all the encouragement Tiffany needed. High on adrenaline, classism, and her own unchecked prejudice, she saw Serafina tried to step past her one more time. This, Tiffany decided, was an assault. This woman was putting her hands on her. This was her plane. Get out of first class. Tiffany shrieked, and with all her strength, she drew back her hand and slapped Serafina hard across the face. The sound was shockingly loud. It echoed off the expensive wood and leather. In that instant, everything stopped. The hum of the auxiliary power unit, the faint chatter from the cockpit, the very air in the cabin. It all seemed to go utterly, deathly silent. Serafina didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She simply stood there, the bright red imprint of Tiffany's hand blooming on her cheek. She turned her head slowly, her dark eyes locking onto Tiffany's. Tiffany was breathing hard, her chest puffed up, her eyes wide with a mixture of rage and triumph. Mrs. Davenport behind her actually clapped her hands once. Well done. It's about time someone taught her some manners. The cockpit door burst open. This time, it was both pilots Mark and the senior Captain Miles. They had heard the shriek and the slap. They saw Serafina holding her face and Tiffany standing over her looking victorious. What in God's name is going on here? Captain Miles bellowed, his voice the sound of pure authority. She assaulted me, Captain, Tiffany said immediately, pointing a shaking finger at Serafina. This passenger refused to take a seat and she pushed me. I defended myself. I saw the whole thing, Mrs. Davenport added, stepping into the aisle. She was abusive, violent, and refused to follow protocol. This attendant, Tiffany, is a hero. She protected me. Captain Miles looked at Serafina, his brow furrowed. He didn't recognize her on sight. He just saw a passenger with a red mark on her face and his flight attendant claiming assault. Mom, he said, his voice clipped and professional. Is this true? Did you assault a member of my crew? Serafina lowered her hand from her cheek. The ice in her gaze was absolute. It was so cold, so powerful, that even Captain Miles took an involuntary half step back. She ignored the captain. She ignored Mrs. Davenport. She spoke only to Tiffany, her voice perfectly calm, clear and loud enough for everyone in the cabin to hear. Tiffany, she said. Tiffany, still riding her wave of adrenaline, snapped. What is the call sign for this aircraft? Tiffany blinked, thrown by the non sequitur. What? That's classified. It's not, Serafina replied. It's on the tail. This is November 700, Victor Alpha N700 VA. Do you know what the VA stands for? Tiffany's face was blank. The adrenaline was fading and a cold dread was beginning to seep in. I don't know what you're talking about. It stands, Serafina said, for Vance Aviation. I know where I work, Tiffany stammered. No, Serafina said. I don't think you do, because if you did, you would know that every single asset, every plane, every call sign is personally registered. She took a step closer, and Tiffany flinched. N700 VA, N701 VA, N702 VA. They are all registered to one person. Serafina paused, letting the silence stretch. Tiffany was pale as a ghost, her eyes darting between Serafina the captain and Mrs. Davenport. "You just assaulted me," Serafina said, her voice a whisper that carried like a gunshot. "On my own property." She turned to Captain Miles. Captain put down the sat phone. "Connect me to the ground. I want a direct patch to Robert Harrison, my COO. I want a full security and medical team on the tarmac at LAX. And I want the LAPD." Captain Miles's professional mask broke. His jaw went slack. Robert Harrison, Ms. Vance, Serafina Vance." "Yes, Captain," Serafina said, finally acknowledging him. "And you can consider your flight attendant here on administrative leave effective immediately." Tiffany's entire body seemed to deflate. The blood rushed from her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at Serafina, her eyes wide with a dawning catastrophic horror. Tiffany stammered, her hands fluttering to her chest. "I didn't." Serafina looked her dead in the eye. The moment had finally arrived. "You told me to get out of first class." Serafina said, her voice echoing the attendant's own shriek, but with a terrifying controlled calm. "You slapped me, and then you froze." She took a small step back, gesturing to the cabin, the cockpit, the wings, the very air around them. "You just told me to get off my own plane. I am Serafina Vance. I own this plane. I own this entire company." The freeze was absolute. Tiffany looked as if she'd been flash-frozen, her mouth open, her skin a waxy pale yellow. The only sound was a small, strangled gasp that escaped her throat. Mrs. Davenport, for her part, had turned to stone. Her smug, cruel smile was gone, replaced by a mask of slack-jawed disbelief. That's not possible," she whispered. She's the boss, Mom." Captain Miles said, his voice grim. He turned to his co-pilot. "Mark, escort this passenger, Mrs. Davenport, to the conference room and have her remain there. Do not leave the cockpit unattended." He then turned to Tiffany. "You go to the aftergalley. Do not come out. Do not touch anything. Do you understand me?" Tiffany nodded dumbly, her eyes unseeing. She looked like a sleepwalker or a woman who had just seen a ghost. She stumbled backward, bumping into the bulkhead, and all but fell into the small crew galley, pulling the curtain shut. "M. Vance," Captain Miles said, his face etched with professional horror. "My apologies, I had no idea." "Are you all right? We have a full medical kit." "I'm fine," Captain Serafina said, touching her tender cheek. "But I am not fine with my company. Please make the call. I want Robert Harrison on the line before we hit cruising altitude." "Yes, ma'am." The captain scrambled back into the cockpit. Serafina finally walked past the empty main cabin through the conference area, where Mrs. Davenport was now sitting, ashen-faced, being watched by Mark, and into the owner's suite. She closed the solid wood door, shutting out the rest of the plane. She sat on the edge of the queen-sized bed, took a deep breath, and let the mask of control fall. Her hands were shaking not from fear, but from a profound seismic rage. It wasn't just the slap. It was the ease with which Tiffany had dehumanized her, the glee Mrs. Davenport had taken in it. It was the casual, venomous assumption that a black woman in a sweatsuit could not possibly belong. A few minutes later, the sat phone on the desk chimed. She picked it up. Sarah. Robert Harrison's voice was tiny but full of concern. Miles patched me through. He said there was an incident. "Are you okay? What happened?" Serafina leaned back, closing her eyes. "Robert, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is our new G700 is a beautiful ride. The cabin is quiet. The finishes are perfect. The bad news is that I was just assaulted by one of our flight attendants." There was a dead silence on the line. What, who, when are you hurt? "Tiffany Reynolds, Flight 227, and she slapped me across the face. Because she and our other passenger and Eleanor Davenport decided I didn't belong in first class." "Sweet God," Robert whispered. He was a 60-year-old aviation veteran, a man who had seen everything. But this he had not seen. "Sarah, I hired her. I vetted her." "That's what I want to talk to you about, Robert." Serafina said, her voice all business again. I want you to pull her file. I want to know everything. I want to know who trained her, who recommended her, and what corner you cut to hire her. Because this isn't just a bad apple, Robert. This is poison. This is a lawsuit that would have destroyed us if she had done it to any other passenger. I'm on it, Robert said, his voice hard. I'm pulling her file as we speak. I'll have a full report before you land, and Sarah, the LAPD, will be there. I'll make sure of it. Thank you, Robert. She hung up. The next 4 hours were the longest of Serafina's life. She stayed in the stateroom. The door locked. She could hear faintly the sounds of the plane. Once she heard a muffled, hysterical sobbing from the aft galley. Tiffany was having her breakdown. In the conference room, Mrs. Davenport was having a different kind of breakdown. She was on her own sat phone screaming at what was clearly her husband. I don't care what meeting you're in, Arthur. You have to fix this. No, you don't understand. She owns the whole company. I didn't do anything. I supported the staff. What do you mean? Call the lawyer? You call the lawyer, you fix it. Serafina listened to the muffled panic and felt nothing but cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just karma. This was pest control. Robert called back 2 hours later. His voice was different. It was cold. Sarah, he said, we have a much bigger problem. You were right. It's not a bad apple. It's a bomb. What did you find? Tiffany Reynolds' references are pristine. Too pristine. I made a few calls. Her supposed supervisor at NetJets, never heard of her. The training certificate from the Global Aviation Academy. The academy doesn't exist. It's a shell website. Serafina sat up straight. She's a plant. Worse, Robert said. I ran a deep background check. Her real name is Tiffany Kowalski. She was fired from 2 regional airlines for gross misconduct and aggressive behavior. But here's the kicker. For the last 6 months, her paycheck hasn't been coming from us. What we pay her, of course, but every 2 weeks she gets a second, much larger deposit into an offshore account. The deposits trace back to a holding company in the Caymans one that is wholly owned by Aerolux. Aerolux, her main competitor, the company run by Arthur Davenport. Robert Serafina said, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. The other passenger, it's Elena Davenport, Arthur Davenport's wife. This time the silence on the phone was a palpable shock. Oh my God, Robert breathed. Sarah, it was a setup. It was a planned, deliberate setup. They didn't just hire a racist. They hired a violent one. Put her on a plane with a witness in on the con and waited for her to assault a person of color. They were probably filming it. They would have leaked the video, sued us, and destroyed our reputation in one move. Serafina's blood ran cold. But they never in their wildest nightmares expected that person to be me. They thought they were attacking your brand. Robert said, his voice full of gravel. They had no idea they were attacking the brand's owner. What are your orders, boss? Serafina looked at the red mark on her face in the mirror. It had faded to a dull, angry purple. Her orders were simple. This isn't just assault anymore, Robert. This is corporate espionage. This is a federal crime. I don't just want the LAPD, I want the FBI. The descent into Los Angeles was tense. Captain Miles announced their arrival with a clipped professional monotone, but the entire crew knew this was no normal landing. They weren't directed to the usual private terminal at LAX. Instead, they were guided to a remote, isolated hangar on the south side of the airfield, far from any prying eyes or paparazzi. As the G700 taxied to a halt, Serafina looked out the state heat room window. The sight that greeted her was one of grim satisfaction. There were no valets. There were no black sedans waiting to whisk passengers away. Instead, the tarmac was lit by the flashing blue and red lights of 3 LAPD squad cars and 2 black government-issue Suburbans. Standing near the hangar doors were Robert Harrison, 2 stone-faced men in dark suits, Serafina's personal lawyers, and 2 other individuals, a man and a woman, in the unmistakable sober suits of the FBI. The engines spooled down. The cabin door was unlatched. Robert Harrison boarded the plane first, his face a mask of controlled fury. He walked straight past the main cabin, past the curtained galley where Tiffany was hyperventilating, and went to the stateroom. He saw Serafina and his face softened for just a moment. "Sarah, are you okay?" "I am now," she said, grabbing her duffel. "Is everyone in place?" "They are. The FBI agents are here for the espionage charges. The LAPD is here for the assault." He nodded. "It's time." Serafina walked out of the stateroom. She paused at the galley curtain and pulled it back. Tiffany was huddled on the small jump seat, her face stray with tears and mascara. She was rocking back and forth, muttering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know." When she saw Serafina, she lunged forward, grabbing at her legs. "Please, Miss Vance, please. It was a mistake. I was stressed. She pointed a shaking finger toward Mrs. Davenport. "She egged me on. Please, I'll do anything. I'll work for free. Don't ruin my life." Serafina looked down at the graveling woman with pure, unadulterated disgust. "You didn't know it was me," Serafina said, her voice like ice. "But you knew I was a human being. You knew I was a passenger. You just didn't think I was one that mattered." "No, that's not true." Tiffany sobbed. "Save it," Serafina commanded. "You're right about one thing. You didn't just make a mistake. You committed a felony. Multiple, in fact. 2 uniformed LAPD officers boarded the plane. Tiffany Kowalski." One of them asked. Tiffany's head snapped up. "Kowalski?" "No, it's Reynolds. Mom, you are under arrest for assault, battery, and reckless endangerment on an aircraft." The officer pulled her to her feet, cuffed her hands behind her back, and began to read her Miranda rights. "No, no." Tiffany shrieked, her voice echoing through the cabin. "You can't do this. It was a mistake." "Mrs. Davenport, tell them. Tell them she attacked me." All eyes turned to the conference room. Davenport had her fur cape wrapped tightly around her, her face a mask of terror. She saw the police, the men in suits. She saw her game was over. She stammered. I don't recall exactly what happened." "That won't be necessary, Mom," one of the FBI agents said, stepping onto the plane. He held up a small, high-definition camera no bigger than a coin. "It seems your accomplice, Ms. Kowalski, was filming the entire encounter for your employers at Aerolux. We pulled it from her jacket pocket. We have the whole thing in 4K, the threats, the shove, the slap, and we have your voice, Mrs. Davenport, telling her to put her in her place." Mrs. Davenport's face, if possible, turned an even paler shade of white. She looked like she was going to be sick. "Eleanor Davenport," the second FBI agent said, stepping toward her. "You are being detained on suspicion of conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, wire fraud, and giving false statements to federal officers. You have the right to remain silent." Mrs. Davenport did not shriek like Tiffany. She crumpled. All the bluster, all the entitlement, all the arrogant cruelty evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, small-looking old woman. "My husband," she whispered. "I need to call my husband." "Your husband is otherwise occupied, ma'am," the agent replied, taking her arm. "He's currently in a meeting with our colleagues at the Southern District of New York." As the 2 women were escorted off the plane in handcuffs, Serafina Vance stood at the top of the stairs, watching them cross the tarmac. The flashing lights illuminated their walk of shame. Tiffany was sobbing a hysterical, animalistic wail. Mrs. Davenport was silent, her head bowed. Robert stood beside his boss. "Well, that's one way to handle a customer complaint." Serafina didn't smile. She just watched until they were put into the separate cars. "Get the internal security footage from this plane," Robert, she ordered. "And get the file from that little camera. I want our media team to have them. We're not just going to win this, we're going to control it. Aerox wanted a story. We're going to give them one." The fallout was not a quiet, behind-the-scenes legal battle. Serafina Vance ensured it was a public execution. She didn't leak the story. She detonated it. Her communications team released a curated package to every major news outlet. One a crisp, high-definition statement from Serafina Vance, her cheek still faintly bruised, explaining that Vance Aviation was the target of a violent, racist and criminal act of corporate sabotage. 2. The full, unedited audio from Tiffany's hidden camera. The world heard Tiffany's sneering. "Are you with a service?" They heard Mrs. Davenport's. "What is that doing in here?" They heard the escalation, The clear, calm warnings from Serafina, and they heard the sickening, undeniable crack of the slap, followed by Mrs. Davenport's cheerful, "Well done." 3. Confirmation of the FBI's involvement and the arrests of Tiffany Kowalski and Eleanor Davenport. The story was explosive. It was the lead story on Good Morning America, the Today Show, and the front page of the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. The headline wrote itself, "Billionaire CEO assaulted on her own plane in racist corporate plot." The karma that followed was not gentle. It was swift, brutal, and total. For Tiffany Kowalski, her life was over. The video made her the most hated woman in America for a week. Fired instantly, she was not just unhirable in aviation, she was unhirable anywhere. Her trial was short. Faced with the high-definition video evidence, her self-defense claim was laughed out of court. She was found guilty of assault battery and reckless endangerment. The corporate espionage charges were handled by the federal government. She was sentenced to 8 years in a federal penitentiary. She lost her apartment, her car, and every friend she had. She entered prison a forgotten, disgraced woman. For Eleanor and Arthur Davenport, the social and financial ruin was catastrophic. Mrs. Davenport, out on bail, was instantly ejected from every charity board, every country club, and every socialite's guest list. She was a pariah. The audio of her gleeful cruelty and undisguised racism made her toxic. Arthur Davenport, her husband, fared no better. The FBI investigation into Aerolux revealed a pattern of fraud, sabotage, and illegal practices. The board of directors in a panic fired him. His partners sued him. Aerolux, his life's work, collapsed under the weight of the scandal and the massive civil suit brought by Vance Aviation. The company was bankrupted and its assets were auctioned off, with Serafina Vance placing the winning bid, absorbing their best planes into her own fleet for pennies on the dollar. The Davenports lost their shipping empire, their social standing, and in the end, their marriage. They were last seen in grainy photos arguing outside a small condo in Florida for Vance Aviation. The company's stock, which had a brief 5% dip when the news first broke, skyrocketed. Serafina had done the impossible. She had turned a vicious assault into the single greatest branding opportunity of her career. She was hailed as a titan of industry, a symbol of grace under pressure. Black-owned businesses and female entrepreneurs celebrated her. Her refusal to be silenced. Her calm but ruthless response became a case study in business schools. Clients flocked to Vance Aviation, not just because it was luxurious, but because it was run by a woman you did not mess with. Bookings tripled in 6 months. The story had become a legend. The story of the racist attendant, the cruel socialite, and the black woman who didn't just own the plane, she owned the entire sky. 1 year later, Serafina Vance stood in the same Tetro hangar where the story had begun. But it was not the same. It was twice as large, renovated, and bore a new name: the Serafina Vance Aviation Education and Training Center. After the incident, Serafina hadn't just cleaned house. She had rebuilt it from the foundation up. She'd used the billions she'd won in the civil suit against Aerolux and the Davenports to launch the Vance Initiative. It was a fully funded program dedicated to recruiting, training, and certifying minority female and underprivileged candidates to become pilots, mechanics, and cabin crew in high-end aviation. She didn't just fire the poison, she created the antidote. Today was the graduation of the first class. 50 new professionals, bright, sharp, and from every background imaginable, were receiving their wings. Robert Harrison stood at the podium. "We are here," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "because our founder believes that excellence knows no color. She believes that standards are not just about the thread count of the sheets, but about the content of our character. She faced down the worst of our industry, and instead of just getting angry, she got to work. It is my profound honor to introduce the woman who doesn't just own the plane, she is the plane, Serafina Vance." Serafina took the stage to thunderous applause. She looked out at the new graduates, their faces shining with pride. Her gaze drifted to the new flagship of her fleet, a brand new Gulfstream G800 which was being prepped in the hangar. Its tail number was N1VA. She smiled, the scar on her cheek, long since faded, but the memory a permanent steel rod in her spine. "Thank you," she began, her voice resonating across the hangar. "A year ago, on one of my own aircraft, I was told I didn't belong. I was told to get out. Today I look at you, and I am here to tell you you belong. You belong in the cockpit. You belong in the boardroom. You belong in the owner's suite. We are not just building a company that flies planes. We are building a new standard. Now let's go show the world how it's done." The applause was deafening. As the graduates celebrated, Serafina walked over to the new G800. The lead flight attendant, a sharp young woman from her new program, met her at the door with a warm, professional smile. "Welcome aboard, Miss Vance," she said. "It's an honor to have you." "The honor is all mine, Captain Tob," Serafina replied, smiling back. She stepped onto the plane, took her seat in the owner's suite, and as the doors closed, she looked out the window. She had faced the fire, and she hadn't just survived. She had used the flames to forge an empire. The maiden voyage of N1VA Serafina's new flagship G800 was meant to be a victory lap. It was a statement. The destination was the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, where Serafina was for the first time the keynote speaker. She wasn't just attending as a successful CEO. She was being presented as a global leader in ethical business and corporate resilience. The cabin was a testament to her new standard. The fragrance was a custom blend of white tea and fig. The crew, all graduates of her new initiative, moved with a quiet, sharp efficiency that was both warm and precise. In the cockpit sat Captain Alani Kosis, the valedictorian of the first class. Her co-pilot was Ben Torres, a former Air Force systems engineer. In the cabin, the lead flight attendant was Maria Sanchez, a 20-year industry veteran whom Serafina had personally headhunted from a legacy airline, convincing her to join a company that valued character as much as experience. Robert Harrison sat across from Serafina in the main cabin, sipping a glass of water. "I have to say, Sarah," he remarked, his voice low, This is good. That nightmare with the Davenports, it feels like another lifetime." Serafina looked out the window at the deep, endless blue of the North Atlantic, 39,000 FT below. "It is Robert. We didn't just survive it, we set a new precedent." She felt a rare, genuine sense of peace. She had faced the ugliest parts of her industry. The racism, the classism, the cutthroat sabotage, and she had won. She had built a fortress. Her new plane, N1VA, was the pinnacle of that fortress. It was the safest, most advanced private jet in the sky. The peace lasted for another hour. It was broken by a single subtle flicker of the cabin lights. It was so fast, Serafina thought she'd imagined it. Then a second later, the plane gave a sudden, sickening lurch to the left. Robert's glass of water slid off the polished table and shattered on the floor. In the cabin, Maria was instantly on her feet, her voice calm but firm. "Please, Miss Vance, Mr. Harrison, fasten your seatbelts. It appears we've hit some unexpected clear air turbulence." But Serafina knew turbulence. This was not it. This felt wrong. It felt mechanical. It felt, she realized with a cold pit in her stomach, aggressive. In the cockpit, a nightmare was unfolding. What was that? Ben Torres, the co-pilot, said, his hands already dancing over the controls. "Not turbulence," Captain Alani Kosis snapped. Her eyes were fixed on the primary flight display. A sea of amber and red warning icons was suddenly blossoming across her screen. Master warning, master caution. The plane's automated voice announced its calm tone horrifyingly at odds with the message. Hydraulic failure. Hydraulic failure. Lost main system. Alani said, her voice impossibly steady. She was already working the problem, her hands moving with trained precision. Bleeding pressure fast. "Go to backup." Switching to backup, Ben confirmed. He flipped the guarded switch. Nothing. He tried again. "Captain, the backup system it's unresponsive. The computer is rejecting the command." Alani's blood ran cold on a G800. That was not possible. The systems were triple redundant for the main and the backup to fail simultaneously while the computer fought them. "This isn't a failure, Ben," she said, her knuckles white as she gripped the yoke, fighting the plane's sickening tendency to bank left. "This is an attack." The intercom chimed. It was Sarafina. "Captain Kosis report. Mom, we have a critical flight control issue. I advise you to return to your seat and prepare for an emergency." Alani said, her voice pure condensed professionalism. "I'm coming to the cockpit," Sarafina replied. The door opened and Sarafina entered, bracing herself against the bulkhead as the plane shuddered. She saw the screens. She was no pilot, but she knew what a board full of red meant. "What is it?" "We've lost primary and secondary hydraulics," Alani said, not taking her eyes off the horizon. "And the fly-by-wire system is compromised. It feels like someone else is in the system. Someone fighting me." Ben, the systems expert, was frantically running diagnostics on his panel. "Captain, she's right. I'm seeing malicious code. It's a rootkit deep in the flight control module. It's actively countering your inputs. It's trying to force us into a dive." Sarafina's mind flashed back to the Aerolux investigation, the sabotage, the criminal network. She had thought she'd cut it all out. "It's a ghost." Sarafina whispered, her voice hardening. "A ghost from Aerolux." The plane shuddered again, more violently this time. A new alarm blared. "Engine 2, flame out," Ben shouted. "The virus! It's feeding the FADC, full authority digital engine control. Bad data, it's choking the engine." They were now in a multi-million-dollar metal tube, 3,000 odds unknown from land with one engine, no hydraulics, and a malevolent computer actively trying to kill them. "This is not how this ends," Sarafina said, her voice ablaze. She turned to her captain. "Alani, what do you need?" Captain Kosis took a deep breath. This was it. This was the test. All that training, all that prejudice she'd faced her whole life. All those instructors who said she didn't have the right stuff. It all came down to this moment. "I need to break the machine," Alani said. "Ben, I'm going to degraded law. Disconnect the flight control computers. All of them." Ben's eyes went wide. "Captain, that will be on manual. No fly-by-wire, no augmentation. It'll be like flying a brick. It's that or we let the virus fly us into the ocean," Alani snapped. "Do it now." "Doing it," Ben said. He pulled 2 levers, a move so drastic it was meant only for a simulator. A heavy thunk echoed through the airframe. The plane dropped. Without the computers augmenting her, Alani was now flying the G800 on pure raw mechanical linkage. The yoke felt like it was set in concrete. She was in a full-on physical fight, her entire body straining to keep the wings level. "Robert," Sarafina said into the sat phone, her voice perfectly calm as the plane bucked. "We are declaring an emergency. I have an active cyber attack on my aircraft originating from a ghost program from Aerolux. We are diverting. Find me the nearest runway now." Robert, strapped into his seat, his face pale, was already on it. "Gander, Newfoundland. It's the closest 400 miles. I'm patching in a mayday." In the cabin, Maria was a pillar of strength. She had the 2 other executives strapped in, heads down, and was moving through the cabin, securing every latch, every loose item. She moved with a practiced, urgent grace, her face set in a mask of determination. For the next 50 minutes, Alani Kosis fought the sky. Every gust of wind threatened to flip them. Ben, his own tasks done, was her second set of muscles, his hands on his own yoke, helping her wrestle the wounded jet. Altitude 3 saw. Ben called out his voice. "Gander in sight. Runway 22. Winds are high. Crosswind at 30 knots. "Damn it!" Alani grunted, her arms burning. A 30-knot crosswind with no hydraulic-powered rudder was a death sentence. "Sarafina," she said, breathing heavily. "It's going to be rough. The landing gear, it's on gravity drop. I don't know if it will hold." "You will hold, Captain Sarafina," said her hand on the back of Alani's seat. "You are a Vance pilot. You were trained for this. Put this plane on the ground." "Yes, Mom." Alani lined up the runway. The plane was coming in too fast, too heavy. Without her computers, she was flying on instinct. Sink rate, the computer warned. "Shut up," Alani hissed at the machine. She flared, pulling back with every ounce of her strength. The plane hit the runway with a crash that rattled Serafina's teeth. The right landing gear weakened by the impact, and the sabotage collapsed. The G800 veered, skidding off the tarmac, its right wing digging into the frozen mud. Sparks and snow flew past the cockpit windows as the plane spun in a gut-wrenching arc before finally horribly screeching to a halt. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the wind howling outside and the dying whine of the single engine. "Evacuate!" Alani gasped. "Evacuate now!" Maria had the door open before the plane even stopped moving. The emergency slides deployed. Within 60 seconds, all passengers and crew were out huddled on the frozen ground as fire trucks surrounded the wounded steaming jet. Serafina stood apart from the group, wrapped in a fireman's blanket. She was staring at the N1VA, her flagship, a symbol of victory, now lying broken in a snowy field in Newfoundland. Robert Harrison found her, his phone pressed to his ear. His face was a mask of pure cold fury. "Sarah," he said, his voice shaking. "I've got the FBI, the tech who prepped this plane. He was one of the mechanics from the Aerolux acquisition. We vetted him. We retrained him. He was a model employee." "Who was he?" Robert Serafina asked, her own voice terrifyingly calm. "His name is Frank Russo. He was terminated from our Tetro facility 2 weeks ago. We found irregularities, lapses in his logs. We thought it was just incompetence. But it wasn't," Serafina said. "It wasn't a question." "No," Robert said, his voice cracking. "The feds just sent me his file. Frank Russo's mother. Her maiden name was Kowalski. He is Tiffany Kowalski's first cousin." Serafina closed her eyes. The ghost, the last venomous remnant of the life she thought she had left behind. Tiffany's family. They hadn't just been racist. They hadn't just been spiteful. They were vengeful. And they had just tried to assassinate her at 39,000 FT. She looked over at her crew. Alani and Ben were talking to the NTSB investigators. Maria was checking on the other executives. They were shaken. They were cold, but they were alive. They had performed perfectly. Her new standard had held not against a verbal assault, but against a lethal technical one. A cold, hard fire lit in Serafina's eyes. She had been merciful in a way. She had let the Davenports crawl away into their bankrupt obscurity. She had let the law handle Tiffany. This was different. This was not just an attack on her. This was an attack on her people, on her legacy. She turned to Robert. "Get me a new plane. I'm still going to Davos. I'll be late, but I will be there." "And Russo?" Robert asked. "Russo is the foot soldier," Serafina said, watching the wind whip snow across the broken wing of her jet. "I want to know who funded him. I want to know who he talked to. I want to know everyone who ever had lunch with Arthur Davenport or sent $1 to Tiffany Kowalski's prison commissary. I didn't just win a lawsuit, Robert. I started a war, and they just tried to kill the Queen." She pulled the blanket tighter. "It's time to end it. Find them all. Find every last ghost in my machine and exorcise them." And that's how a simple flight turned into a battle for $1 billion empire. Serafina Vance's story teaches us a powerful lesson. Never ever judge someone by their appearance. The person you underestimate might just be the one who owns the entire plane. The hard karma that hit Tiffany and the Davenports wasn't magic. It was the direct result of their own hate and arrogance. Serafina didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She changed the game, proving that the best response to prejudice isn't just to rise above it, but to come back and buy the whole building. What did you think of Tiffany's downfall? Was it justified? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you loved this story of shocking twists and hard karma, please make sure to like this video and share it with someone who needs to see it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another.